On this episode of Forge and Anvil, we will discuss the White House flying a pride flag up front and center for all to see as a shining endorsement of transgenderism. Next, we'll talk about how California will be renting wombs to gay men for equal fertility rights. Then we'll talk about how Garth Brooks has offended his audience by calling those who boycott Bud Light a-holes. All this and more on Forge and Anvil. Welcome in, everybody. We had a last-minute guest cancellation, and I reached out to some of my good friends here and managed to get together a full panel, and I'm super excited about it. So I'm joined by Jason from Dear Woke Christian. So Jason, Go ahead and say hello and tell the audience who you are, what you do.
Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for having me, Connor. It's Jason from Dear Woke Christian and Dear Woke Christian podcast. I am a YouTuber and content creator that specializes in addressing how critical race theory and progressive Christianity clash with biblical Christianity. And that's what I do.
Awesome. Well, welcome back, Jason. And
appreciate you, man.
Again, Anastasia Hibbs is back. So say hello, Anna.
Hello. Well, I'm most well known for being on the Steve Day Show and also him being my dad. Yeah, that's kind of what I'm most well known for. I'm being one of the only 20-year-old women who doesn't like murdering babies. So there's that as well.
And we are glad for it. And back again is authoritarian, pro-interventionist Zachhval.
Oh, stop. They know me. Zachhval, singer, songwriter, guitar player extraordinaire, serving up the chicken fried gospel with a side of that groovy gravy for your listening and dining pleasure each and every Tuesday night here on the tube of you. Of course, you can also listen to my music on the streaming platform of your choice. Just type in my name and you'll find me.
Awesome. Welcome back. Well, we'll dive straight into our first story. This is from the Post Millennial. Biden drapes LGBT progress flag over White House while claiming laws banning child sex changes target trans kids. President Biden hosted the largest pride event ever held at the White House on Saturday. With hundreds in attendance, he said, "I want to send a message to the entire community, especially to transgender children. You are loved. You are heard. You belong." In a speech on the South Lawn, the president claimed that bills aimed to protect children from sex change procedures before adulthood are an attack on the child's freedom. Families across the country facing excruciating decisions to relocate to a different state to protect their child from dangerous anti-LGBTQ laws, he said. "We need to push back against the hundreds of callous and cynical bills and laws introduced in states targeting transgender children, terrifying families, and criminalizing doctors and nurses. These bills and laws attack the most basic values and freedoms." So my first thought when I saw this, I immediately thought there is no such thing as neutral spaces. And that's the first thing that immediately pops into my head. The moment that Christianity left the public square, or at least many Christians, I should say, individually abandoned the public square, more and more of this sinful behavior began to creep into the mainstream, all the way to the point where we now have the White House and the president advocating for transgenderism and sex change surgeries. So, Jason, what was your initial thoughts to this?
What else do we expect? What else do you honestly expect from a government that, and this has been going on for quite some time, so it's not new, it's not brand new with Biden, but for a government that hates its children to the point that it murders them in the womb, that hates God so much in the image of God that it would deface and literally make practice of defacing image bearers of God. What else do we honestly expect? So that being the case, I'm not terribly surprised. I just wonder why are we surprised? That's really my question.
Yeah. Anastasia, what about you?
No, I have something in my throat. No, I 100% agree. I think that there's also a big difference between love and affirmation. And I think that's kind of one of the biggest places that we as like conservatives or even as Christians and then these people over here, like we clash on, is because when we go up against these things, it's not because we don't love them. We're doing them because we're doing these things because we love them. We're doing these things though because we don't affirm them. Like when Jesus was here, he didn't affirm anybody where they were at. He loved them a lot, and he loved them so much to tell them, hey, sorry, buddy, you got it wrong. Or, hey, I'm sorry, if you keep doing this, you're going to get hurt. And I mean, like, one of my favorite Bible verses, which I say all the time, John 15:18, if the world hates you, know that they hated me too. You know, that's not very affirming to be where you're at. How is that affirming to be like, by the way, people are going to hate you? But it's loving because he gives us that news. And I think a lot of the times, like LGBTQ and like that kind of group and stuff, it's all about affirming you where you're at, affirming what decision you want to make on what day. And they don't think about, like, they don't actually love. When they say you are loved and you belong, like, okay, but they love you so much that they're going to put you under a knife, or they love you so much because they're going to give you drugs that will change your life forever, or they love you so much because they're going to put you in harm's way. That's not love. Just because you affirm something doesn't mean that it's love. But I completely agree. I mean, it's no surprise at all. This is where we're at.
Zach, were you surprised?
No, I mean, for much the same reason. We live in a fallen, sinful world full of broken people, and it's no surprise that those same broken people are in our government there. What was interesting there was the use of the word freedom as in reference to children there. That's something that was kind of glossed over in the article, but it's something interesting to think about because you don't really have the same freedoms as a child that you do as an adult, simply because you are still under the stewardship and care of your parents. So working with that mindset, I look at some of the laws that Biden was talking about there, and where he's saying that these are harmful and restrictive towards trans kids or gender questioning kids. I actually see them as, in a weird way, more protective of them for some of the reasons that Anna outlined there, that you can do some serious damage to yourself. And with some of the chemicals and stuff like that, a lot of that is still too new of science to know exactly what the long-term damage is. The immediate side effects are apparent, but the long-term damage there is yet to be seen. So rushing any type of law for or against these types of things seems a bit hasty. And so that, to me, is the most concerning thing, is that, laws, banning these things or allowing them, there needs to be more consideration on this. It's not far from settled, and, there are ways to handle these things rather than, signing laws into place. There needs to be more discussion and things like that. Yeah.
One of the things I thought was interesting is Biden talking about moving to different states in order to receive, the gender affirming care. What I find interesting is that's exactly how our country was intended to work. And, you basically have the president essentially disregarding federalism and just the entire idea of state sovereignty, which is, not shocking, obviously, given everything else we've seen from this administration. But I'm curious, Zach, because it seems like you've changed your stance on this a little bit from like previous episodes, because you usually take the libertarian approach. So when it comes specifically to like transgender surgeries and gender affirming care, what kind of led you to change your mind on sort of?
I haven't changed my mind. This is what we're talking about is kids here. As an adult, again, I'm not affirming, but you still have the right to do with yourself what you please. But we're talking about kids here, and those kids are still, a lot of that responsibility falls on the parents there, right? So let's say that there are no laws prohibiting these things, right? And a kid decides to actually undergo the surgery and things like that. Whatever negative consequences happen, a botched surgery, permanently damaging their chemical makeup or their biological makeup, rather, a lot of that responsibility falls on you as a parent, because again, these are your kids. You're responsible for their care, their physical well-being. I have a friend of mine who was, he was in talks with having a kid with his wife, and he's like, and he's not quite there yet, but he said, like, if I had a kid, one of us is dying, and it's not going to be me. So like it's, like you're responsible for keeping your kids safe. So this is coming from somebody who's not a parent, and probably far from it. but it seems to me like that's your primary role, is to protect them, at least physically. And you're physically altering someone's body in a way that can't, like, I don't know what it looks like to be reversed. I've seen mixed results on that. So my stance hasn't changed on that. It's just we're in the context of kids here. I would say it's more nuanced than changed. It's not as black and white as yes or no. Yeah.
Jason, you are the one with the oldest kids.
Yeah.
So what is your take on this as someone who's dealing with having to navigate these conversations, and any response to what Zach said, if anything, to build off of that?
This is a wicked, evil practice. We've spent the better part of a decade. Actually, truly, I believe it's a scheme to limit the amount of humans that are on the earth, because we've spent better part of a decade, maybe even two, trying to push relationships that don't result in children. Now, the children that are born, we are telling them that they can cut, snip, and do other things to healthy body parts, which, by the way, keep in mind, we're talking about doctors that took the Hippocratic Oath to protect and to help bodies, but they're literally cutting off perfectly working body parts to turn somebody into something at a young age. I shudder to think, when my kids, thankfully now they're older, but when they were younger, they would do some of the craziest stuff. I could only imagine a little person just deciding they want to do something, and some adult in their perverted, wicked minds whisking them off to get sliced and chopped and snipped and sewn because today they said that they feel like a boy. Like, whatever. Like, when I was younger, I mean, a tomboy was a perfectly normal girl that just liked to play football or just liked to climb trees or went down to the creek and found crawdaddies. It was really that simple. Now all of a sudden, a tomboy has to be a boy named Tom. Like, wait, come on, wait, pump the brakes here. So I believe it's wicked. I believe it's evil at the end of the day. And we as society will have to answer to God for this activity. No, we didn't support it, but we as society have to see there's no other way. But we deserve the meteorite that we get. If the Lord decides that, let me just flip a little Sodom and Gomorrah on y'all. We deserve it. We fully deserve it.
Yeah. Michaela in the chat said, attacking the seed or child of the family is also attacking the future of the faith.
That's it.
Yeah.
Because it's going to be really hard to proselytize little Tommy when he was actually born, Teresa. It's going to be really hard to do that in your household. It's going to really flip. Because you do realize now everything about these people is about their genitalia, lack of, or what they're trying. So they can't just read a book. They can't just drive a car. They can't just go shopping. All of this stuff has to be informed by their private parts. Like, when was this ever a thing? Like, when was this ever a thing except now, where I can't even go to the grocery store. I have to go to a transgender grocer. Like, for what? I just want some Cheerios. What are we talking about here, people? So, but that's the perverted wickedness of our minds. Like, we've been given over to a reprobate mind, and we're looking at Romans 1 in real time. Like, this is. I'm sure there were countless other times in human history when they were like, man, we're probably in Romans 1, or wow, this is really what we thought. I think we're living it like in HD up in here. Like, this is
Romans 1 is looking soft right now.
Yeah, right. Paul, maybe Paul, you undercut it. But no, I think and then lastly, to build off of what Michaela said, I think this lends itself to a maybe looking at Revelation from the amillennial approach, that this is an ongoing situation, because boy, that dragon sure seems to be crouched right before the woman, trying to eat her young again. So
yeah,
that was just my little 2 cents. Hopefully we can make $1.
Yeah, there was an interesting line in there in the actual article. I don't know if anybody caught it, where it was actually from Jill Biden, where She was saying, we just want our kids to be kids, running around and eating too much sugar. And I was like, exactly, exactly.
That's what we're advocating for.
Yeah. So like nobody disagrees with you on that. It's just like, some of us want, a little bit of skepticism to be applied to the things that people are asking you for. It's one thing to listen and things like that. And it's one thing to have discourse about it. It's another thing to hear three people's opinions and then go off signing a bunch of laws and stuff like that. And some of the pushback to it from the medical insurance companies and things like that, it's worth, I didn't have time today to do it, but it's worth looking into about how it will increase the cost of premiums and things like that. Yeah. So there are long-term consequences to any legislation. That's why my whole argument is let's pump the brakes here. Let's assume for a second here that maybe that's not the healthiest thing, and that having, some type of legislation to protect, these kids that are trying to figure themselves out, might be better than not having those laws.
Yeah.
Let's start there and then maybe talk about removing those.
Sure. Joel said, yeah. Sarah Joel said, yeah, we see how well Joe Biden's kids turned out.
No kidding.
What do you mean, no Shara? They're great, upright.
Can we also just point out though, their children didn't have this situation.
They didn't.
I mean, they didn't. Now, granted, whatever the issues are with the Biden children, that's whatever. But they didn't cut and snip and sew and do all this foolishness to their children. But you want us to do it to ours. I think it's adorable. Like Levine. He literally said, I'm glad that I chose to change my gender after I had children. Why? Because you know that you'll never do it again. If you snip, cut, tip, and all this kind of craziness. So they already know what they're doing. There's no way in the world they haven't thought about it, Zach. So I don't want to disagree with you, but I do want to push back. There's no way in the world they think that taking a 7, an 8, a 9-year-old girl who hasn't even, good gracious, alive, and saying, oh, for crying out loud, what's the difference between female genitalia mutilation then? We have no position now. Remember that big hubbubaloo about the practice of cutting off a young girl's private parts?
Yeah.
Again, we have no justification now anymore. When that religious cult actually looks more sane than the United States, we're done. Yeah. We're wrapped up.
Yeah. So I don't think we actually disagree for the matters of clarity there. I think.
I just want to pick a fight with you. I just want to hear your I like the way your voice sounds. I was actually kind of pick a fight with you. That was all.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no. I just have that kind of face where people just want to fight me. I don't know why.
That's it.
I don't think we disagree entirely. I think my point is one side is very clearly thought about this, and that is the side that is advocating for the removal of these types of laws to make it easier for kids to get these surgeries. And I'm saying, hold up, let's think about this. I'm glad that you you guys have thought about it, but some of us haven't. And also you haven't brought, you brought stuff to the table and you're not letting us respond to that without, calling names. And that's where a lot of my concern is why the pushback then? Why is it controversial for me to say, hey, let's pump the brakes here and think about maybe switching perspectives and thinking maybe this is not the healthiest thing for, these, for kids, right? Whether it's a spiritual thing, we're having here, a conversation like that, or, a scientific thing, let's just at least have that conversation. And it just seems to me, it's just been, let's remove protections and let kids have these gender reassigning surgeries and not talk about anything else. It's that's where my concern is, if that makes sense.
No, it makes perfect sense.
It just seems like the opposite of what a healthy society would do.
My concern also comes from just thinking about, like you said, Zach, removing barriers from children. I think that there's also just a push for children are smart enough to know what they want to do. Children can make these decisions. Parents don't need to be involved. And it ultimately ends up being a erosion of parental rights.
Yeah.
And in addition to eroding parental rights, it's also obviously hypocritical. Shara in the chat said something about how a 12-year-old can't go and get a tattoo, but they can change their gender. It's like, exactly. They're very selective about when they want children to have freedom. And it almost always is in the direction of their sexuality. It's almost never any other category, with the exception of maybe doing drugs, different type of substance abuses. Aside from maybe substance abuses, it tends to always be revolving around sexuality. I mean, am I the only one that has seen that? Am I wrong here?
No, and
you're not wrong.
Yeah. And like sexuality is also like, I mean, not that the substance abuse and things like that is black and white, but like sexuality, it's just a very confusing and like heavy topic. And so for it to be, treated more loosely than tattoos, or seeing R-rated movies and things like that is another thing that I find kind of concerning.
Can I ask what you mean by when you say that sexuality is a confusing and hard topic?
Well, for much there is a lot of confusion around that, and rather than, it goes back to what I was talking about before, where these folks have made up their minds and are trying to make up our minds for us. And I think there's a lot of people that are stuck in the middle. There's another article that we're going to talk about later on about how social conservatism is on the rise. And there's a lot of people that are stuck in the middle with these issues there. And I think for a kindergartner, there's having the birds and the bees talk, and then there's the step beyond that, right? Where what is it like when a boy likes another boy, right? Or a girl likes another girl? That's where things start to get complicated.
But even in that, we've sexualized our community, our society, to the point that you can't even say, like, Connor is my good friend. I really enjoy hanging out with him. We play video games, we ride bikes together, we catch tadpoles down at the pond, at the creek. Well, y'all must be getting ready to get married. The heck? Like, how did we get here? I was like my friend Connor. Like, I could only imagine if this foolishness happened pre-internet. Like, first of all, I don't think it could happen but I'm like, children, I'm the oldest one on here. Children used to just hang out with each other and just have fun with each other. There was not a component of sexuality to it. It was just hanging out with my friends, just going on bike riding and doing this and such of that nature. There's nothing to it. Now everything, because their minds have been given over to perversion, everything is the punchline is sex, no matter what. You can be playing a guitar, you could be reading a book, you could be driving your car. It doesn't matter. Somehow or another, it's got to be related to sex, because we've perverted ourselves to the point of insanity. So my only pushback would be, the reason some of these things are confusing and such like that is because we have allowed it to, because we've denied reality and the truth of what God's word actually says, that a man is made for a woman and a woman is made for a man. And this should be, mommy and daddy should get together. Now, mind you, we can have like a 3-day conversation about the fact that we've given up our position to call out heterosexual sins. And now this is just the natural progression. We should have been calling that other foolishness out a long time ago, but we didn't. You gave it a nod and a wink, and it's okay. And now look where we are. The camel's nose is in the tent, and it's a wrap.
I think that with like the issue of transgenderism and stuff, especially where we're at, that's my ice maker. Sorry. I don't know if you can hear that. I just feel like it's a really delicate issue, more in the sense of like when it comes to the children, because like I know that like someone that I work with had kind of seen like Chloe Cole speak, and she was talking about how like, yes, she's like 18, 19, but her like mind is still working at like a 13-year-old level, because that's where she stopped progressing, because that's when she like got surgeries and was being so heavily influenced by everybody. So like, yes, I think, and this is something that I've kind of started to tone back a little bit, like never tone back when you're telling truth. Like truth should always be number one, but like the people on the other side, I guess you can say, like I was talking about the difference between loving and affirming, are being so kind and so gentle. And it's like, why wouldn't you, if you're a young kid who, you know, kind of like Zach's talking about, is confused and it's hard and they don't understand, and you can come over to this group where everything makes sense because nothing does, and you can be anything you absolutely want. And that's easy to just be like, because I mean, everybody wants to go, you know, on the big road. Nobody wants to go on the path less traveled. So I feel like that's also just not necessarily a warning, but kind of like a caution that I would also say to, you know, people listening out there and people having these conversations is like, yes, like we know where we stand, boy, boy, girl, girl, done. But like to these people, it's like so hard for them to wrap their brains around that, because a lot of them just stop developing, they stop maturing, they stop growing up. And so they're working at like a 13, 12, 11-year-old level. And so I was just more so trying to heed kind of that caution, because it's hard right now. I mean, transgenderism is literally a spit in God's face back to all the way back to the beginning of when we started, you know, but it's easy for me to tell that to you guys because we all agree and we all can, you know, our minds are developed and we can have this conversation. But when you're talking to some of these people, like they don't get that and they don't understand that. And like, shame on the parents that put their children through this. And I think every single one of them should be in prison for the way they treat their children, because a lot of people can't have kids out there, and you were blessed with children, and you decide, instead of caring for them and nurturing for them and looking at them and saying, you were not made with a mistake. You were made to be who you are, and I love you for that, no matter how you feel. And for them to just go ahead and do these things is despicable and disgusting.
Amen.
Yeah. It honestly boils down to a lack of catechism, I think.
Oh, for sure.
I think just lack of catechizing within the home has led to so many of these children being so susceptible to just the constant hammering from the culture. And it doesn't help too that I think that public schools is so easily embraced by even the church community. You know, I don't think that it's necessarily, you know, it's hard to say that every single person should homeschool, because I get that not everyone is in the perfect position to homeschool, but boy, there's just a larger responsibility needs to be taken on by the parents with just general catechizing.
I can dig it.
But let's go ahead and move on to our next story. So this is also from the Post Millennial. So we're double dipping here tonight. Post Millennial.
Let's go.
California moves to provide surrogates to gay male couples in the name of fertility equality. If it'll load for me here. California Bill SB 729 seeks to redefine infertility to be a status as opposed to a medical condition, changing the definition to a person's inability to reproduce either as an individual or with their partner without medical intervention, would classify gay men as infertile. The bill, which passed the Senate last month, would require insurance companies to cover in vitro fertilization procedures. With the change in definition, this would also include forcing the firms to cover surrogacy for gay males. Co-author of the bill, Caroline Menjivar, I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, but oh well, said the bill will ensure that queer couples no longer have to pay more of out-of-pocket to start families than non-queer families, she continued. This bill is critical to achieving full lived equality for LGBTQ plus people, as well as advancing well-rounded and comprehensive health care for all Californians. An organization called Men Having Babies boasted that the bill will remove financial barriers for gay men who wish to rent a woman's womb to have a child who has the DNA of one of the males in the relationship. So there's more there, and we can definitely dive deeper into the article as we discuss. But first of all, just the idea of renting wombs and the fact that the article made a point to mention that. I honestly think about how the right is always accused of Handmaid's Tale and how we want to bring about the Handmaid's Tale.
Yeah.
But then here we are in California, and they are like, "Oh, if you're a man and you have another man that you are shacking up with, and you want to go ahead and have the state pay for you to rent out a woman's womb. I can't say that tonight. You go on ahead. So apparently California has officially brought about the Handmaid's Tale. So what are your thoughts, Anastasia?
One, I don't know why anybody even lives there anymore.
I don't understand it.
I don't get it. I don't know if I've told this I don't know if I've said this before. My husband and I, we went on a vacation to Los Angeles thinking we were like, grew up in Iowa. We were like, let's go have our like LA little dream. And it was a nightmare. It was so dirty. And it's honestly like, and at the time it was just like, we were just like, but now that I'm looking back, like, that's just so sad. Like when you live like that, that's because you are living in a world, like I said before, you're living in a world where everything's right. So nothing is, and everybody's just given in to what they want to do. So that's why it looks like that, because nobody loves them enough to crack down on things. And it looks disgusting, and the people resonate with that and everything else. So period, done. But anyways, as far as the renting a womb thing, I was literally going to say the exact same thing that you said, Connor, because I was going to say that too. I was like, I thought we were the bad guys because we were trying to make your women have our babies and blah, 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 blah. And you guys are doing the exact same thing. Like, you literally made a TV show about it, and now you're doing it. And now you guys accuse us. It's hypocrisy, honestly. So, but Connor, I was going to say almost the exact same thing that you said.
Well, it's really intersectionality. I mean, the gay man apparently is higher on the hierarchy than the straight woman. I mean, that's what it seems to be. And I know, Jason, you talk a lot about intersectionality. So I know that that's a whole convoluted, ever-changing landscape to figure out who has the most privilege. But clearly, in this case, you can see that gay men have more privilege over heterosexual couples in California who actually have to pay to have this done. And that being said, I do know some loved ones in California that they struggled with fertility issues, and they were not reimbursed or covered to do any form of fertility care. But here we are encouraging what we are always going to be incentivizing what we as a society want more of. And California has decided that they want to abolish traditional norms and what the nuclear family looks like. And so here we are. Mm-hmm. They are paying for gay individuals to be able to rent wombs. Zach, did you have any thoughts on this?
Out there?
Go ahead.
How do you, I just as a lady, I'm just kind of like how demeaning would that, I think about that now, and I'm like, that is so demeaning, and it breaks my heart, because it's like they're literally moving to the place that they didn't want to move, and they were doing that. It's demeaning. It's disgusting, honestly.
Yeah.
I mean, perhaps one of the more, besides what's already been said, obviously, one of the more disturbing things about that is like the change in definition of infertility. Yes. That's a dangerous thing to do when you're changing, because because you can be gay and be fertile, right? And you can
technically are fertile.
That's what I'm getting at.
You just put it in the wrong spot.
Exactly. Yeah. So and then again, for what she was talking about, like fertility is the thing that a surprising number of couples struggle with is infertility issues, and there's lots of reasons for that.
Yeah,
there is.
Yeah, so again, and like Connor was saying, it's it's to my knowledge, it's never not been a cheap thing to have to go through. So maybe we need to take a look at that before we start picking and choosing, who gets. I would rather we not pick and choose, but it seems like there's an issue here within the healthcare system itself that needs to be addressed before we start, start changing things willy-nilly, I guess. And so, when we're changing with established, medical terminology, I get that things need to change. That's not my argument, is but there is a process for how we change these things. And it seems like more often than not, again, circling back around to what we just talked about, it gets ignored. And I don't exactly know why. It's one of the more frustrating things about it.
Yeah, the scientific process that we traditionally learned in school, or at least we should have learned in school, is no more. Honestly, the last few years, if nothing else, the last few years, absolutely.
It's still happening.
Buried it alive, and it's still screaming for air. And
I wouldn't go that far. It's still happening. It's just not the focal point, which is what I think bothers me the most. Is because you don't have to look very hard to find honestly, honest dissenting information on, or pushback, let's say, against, letting kids have gender reassignment surgery, or pushback against, bills like this. You don't have to search very hard. It's being done. It's just we're not allowed to talk about it.
It's the institutions. The institutions are trying to gatekeep that knowledge.
Well, see, and I would like to say that, but again, there's research being done, and there people are getting funding for this from somewhere, but we're not allowed to talk about it publicly. That's what's bothering me. So I don't know. I waver back and forth on the institutional side of things. It's on one hand, they're paying for these things, but also on the other hand, they're not allowing them to be discussed in public places. And the internet is not a good place to have a conversation. Twitter, not a place you want to be having conversations with. You know what I mean? Facebook groups, again, I learned a lot, but it's not the place to be having these types of conversations.
Mm-hmm.
And so it creeps me out that again, I had no idea that this was even being, I guess I could guess. If you would give me 3 guesses, I'd probably get it within the first guess. But it's it bothers me that there's something wrong with you if you just even you don't even have to come down as hard as we're coming down here. Just for the one person out there that's hey, let's pump the brakes here for a little bit. And let's talk about this. That person's maligned. That's what freaks me out. Because there's no reason for that. And especially if you think you're right. And let's say for argument's sake, scientifically speaking, you're right. Then you have nothing to be afraid of.
Yeah.
Well, and I think one of the reasons that us as a base, I guess you could say, is almost failing or being steamrolled, has a big problem to do with our churches today, I would say, at least, because I think our churches are so mixed in their messages. And you have one church on this side of the street that's come in, you're LGBT, blah, 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 blah. And then you have this side of the church that's actually, no, you actually have to repent of your sins. You actually have to admit that you actually don't deserve any of this. And which seems more fun, the party over here or the one where you have to actually, for lack of a better term, let go of your pride. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I think that's one of the problems of why we're being so steamrolled. And secondly, I think that sometimes we have a problem with being silent because I think we've kind of come to this point where at least a lot of the people that I used to be friends with and stuff, a lot of my theater friends back when I used to do theater would share a lot of the same opinions that I had, but then we'd get into a group and we'd start having this discussion. I'd be yeah, remember we were talking about this, and they were no, I definitely don't agree with that and blah, 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 blah. So I think one of the problems also that we have today is we should not be afraid of not being liked, because when I finally decided I'm going to stand for truth, I'm going to stand for what God's word said, he provided. My husband and I are doing fine. You know what I'm saying? We live in a fine home. We have food in our stomachs. I'm on this podcast chilling with you guys. Okay. God provides. So I think it's one of those things where it's would I rather have 30 friends, or would I rather know, and when I go to bed and I lay my head on that pillow, that I'm standing for truth? And I think that's a decision that a lot of people struggle with nowadays as well.
Sure, absolutely. I guess maybe I'm speaking from, dare I say, a point of privilege, where I a long time ago, long even before I met Connor, I just stopped caring what people think. And so now it's getting to the point where I can start social engineering people, where I'll just say the most unhinged things solely to see what their response will be. And it's interesting. So, I guess I've never had that fear of just, and also doesn't help that I'm everybody knows I don't, my friends group seems to be dwindling by the day. And there's many reasons for that, but they used to know me as the Mr. Libertarian guy, where they would bring me in to challenge literally everybody else in the room to hear some stuff that they'd never heard before. And the fact that it was all backed up by hours of reading. And at one point or another, I used to be able to, I've lost this to the coffers of time and guitar licks, but I used to be able to give you chapter and verse on where to go to find these things. Can't do that anymore. But again, I'm used to just being the least popular person in the room. So when I'm out there saying, listen, Mr. Gay Dude, like, I want to be your friend and I want to help you, encounter Jesus. But like, at the same time, like, I'm going to try to do that, but I'm also not going to let, things, and I'm not going to sacrifice sound doctrine for the sake of tolerance.
Well, as long as you don't break the 11th commandment. Right, Jason?
Say it one more time.
I said, as long as you don't break the 11th commandment.
Right. Thou shalt be nice. Thou shalt be nice.
Go ahead, Anastasia.
No, and I just think that's that people really need that confidence, because I just don't see that a lot. I don't see us sometimes showing up and showing out and doing the things that we need to do. You know what I'm saying? Or, I mean, like, even, for example, I don't know, maybe this might seem more of like a worldly example, but I'll use this as an example. Like, even with my dad's movie and stuff, like, people being like, oh, I don't want to go, to the theaters, and because I don't want to do this, or I don't want to do that, or I don't do that. Like, okay, but you need to, or I don't want to go and vote because I don't want to wait in the line, or, oh, I have to go to this, or like, okay, well, how are you going to expect change to happen if you're not willing to take that extra step to make change happen? And I think we need confidence to be like, listen, I'm standing in God's truth. I'm going to continue walking in God's truth. I think we also, as a base, sometimes lack the knowledge. Like, something like one of my managers at my job was really challenging us a couple weeks ago. Like, he was like, you guys need to know your stuff. He was like, if you guys are going to work here, he was like, if you guys are going to continue to walk out in truth, like, you need to know the word of God. And I was like, that is such a slap in the face. And I feel like that needs to be a slap in the face that a lot of Christians today need to have too, is like, are you just using this as kind of a badge of honor so that you can kind of use it? Or do you actually know it? Like, my pastor on Sunday was like, I know that you guys know who God is, but do you know the characteristics of God? Do you know what he looks like? Can you explain it to people? Can you point them in the right direction? And I'm sitting there like, honestly, no, I can't. You know what I'm saying? Like, and we all use it as some may have a badge of honor, kind of like on our little Boy Scout sash. But how many of us can be like, you know what? I have this great verse. Let me put it off the top of my head, or have the confidence to be like, let's go to here and let's read this. So I feel like not only do we have to have the confidence to stand in God's truth and know God's truth, but we also have to read the word. Like, we can't be sporting something around and not actually have the knowledge to do it. And we have to show up and show out, or else nothing's going to change.
Yeah. There was a survey done a while ago that I don't have in front of me, but it said that the number one thing that pastors recognize in their church is that the biggest idol is comfort. Mm-hmm. And those same pastors said that they also struggle with comfort, as well as trying to get their congregation to be willing to step into a realm of discomfort. And I think that goes hand in hand with what you're saying, Anastasia, because honestly, people that don't even want to go out and vote, for example, we'll just use that as the example here, because they think it doesn't matter or it doesn't make much of a difference, or whatever the case may be. I mean, what a simple thing that you can do to actively participate in impacting the culture, even if you don't think that Washington is going to be your savior, because let's face it, you're almost never going to get any help from Washington. That's just the reality. There's a reason why an act of Congress is a saying that is similar to when pigs fly, but regardless, we're not endorsing politicians so much as we are endorsing active participation in affecting culture for righteousness. I wanted to bring it back to the chat here because Michaela, in regards to the article, she said, can we please recognize the elimination of the biological mother from the child's life? And that is something that I don't think we've discussed yet, but it is wild to think about that, because as I've seen my wife be a new mom and really go into that role, and watching my child just react to the interaction with her. And there are just certain things, Jason, you can probably attest to this. There are just certain things that daddy is no good for, that they only want mama for. And I just cannot imagine the Pete Buttigieg, the Pete Buttigiegs of the world, kicking the pregnant lady out of the hospital beds that they can sit and take their selfie, and just the effect that that child is going to have growing up, never knowing biological mom.
Can I comment on
is
that?
wild.
Really?
Yeah.
Please.
There was I think it was a cut video. Wow, those people always come out with the craziest videos. But there was a cut video, and it was this girl, and they kind of do this thing where it's like one side is in like they completely disagree, and then they're like, step forward if you agree with this prompt or whatever. But long story short, one of the girls had 2 dads and no mom. And one of the people on the panel was like, I mean, don't you feel like you're kind of like lacking, like you lacked maternal, like in like a maternal figure in your life growing up and all this stuff? And as she started to defend herself, she just started to like completely and totally break down. But like but she continued to defend herself, but she was breaking down, and she's like, I just can't handle this and blah, blah, blah. And like, it just made me see like, why force someone to go through that if they actually don't have to? Like so many kids have to go through that because there's no other option, because either their mothers passed away or they were given up for adoption and then they can never go back. And like, how many times do you hear those kids say, I wish my mom was here. I wish I could find my mom. I wish I even knew who my mom was, or, I would have friends where you're complaining about your mom and they're like, at least you have a mother figure in your life, your mom. So it's like seeing people like that break down. It's like, again, why would you force a child to go through that when they actually don't, when you actually do have a mother in this world who loves you? I don't understand that.
Because we're wicked. Because we're evil. Let's just say it. It makes us, it'll actually help us if we just admit, you know what, you're evil. I mean, that's it. Now, that doesn't mean that the Lord can't save you. That does not mean that you can't be converted, but you're evil. Going back to the exacting change, and this might get into a pseudo discussion debate about, the role of Christians in the national politics and such like that. Our marching orders were to make disciples. And I think we might do well as believers to kind of go back and say, hey, are we doing what we were told to do? Because at the end of the day, we were not told to overturn governments. We weren't told to make the world a better place, just you and me. So we have to be mindful that these are marching orders. This is not our home anymore. Once you are regenerated, your citizenship here in this world was changed. You got a green card, and you are now a citizen sojourning to a different place. It would do us good to just remember that, because at the end of the day, when it's all said and done, no matter what your eschatology is, I think we all can agree to some degree, shape, or form. Yeah, this place is going to be in bad shape when it's over. I mean, I know some people have couched it and made themselves feel really good that we're supposed to make it better. This place is going to be in bad shape when it's over. So let's just admit that and say, hey, we need to snatch as many people as we can and get them on that narrow road, as Anastasia said, as quickly as possible. Moving forward, don't look behind you. Keep going, keep going. But I think that's something we need to remember, that as believers, those who have been regenerated by the power of the Holy Spirit and the preaching of the gospel, need to remember that this is not our home.
Yeah. And to that point, Jason, I think that for me, I'm just going to speak for myself here. I grew up in a church that very much didn't outright say this, but whether they said it or not, it seemed that the church culture at least believed that we are to go and make converts of all nations. And once I finally understood the difference between a disciple and a convert and what that distinction is, that really freed me up to understand why breaking the 11th commandment was so hard for me.
Right. Yeah, definitely. Thou shalt be nice.
Yep. Michaela said in the chat, she said, yes, Anna, and what are the laws surrounding the child and their interaction with that biological mother if they desire it, say, at age 13 or something? Do they get to meet her? My guess is that it is probably just up to the discretion of their legal guardians, which would be the 2 men.
Wait,
right?
there was a case. there was a case of 2 lesbians that were not able to have children, obviously. They got a sperm donor, and I forgot how they got inseminated. And they didn't get inseminated naturally, let's just say like that. And one of the, eventually, the 2 women that were pretending like they were married separated. And the one that had the daughter got sick and had no means to take care of herself. And they were able to sue the sperm donor for child support. I'm like, wow. So I want to say it was in California. I'm trying to look it up. But my point is, all of these new ridiculousnesses that have come up this is going to be one of them. I wouldn't be surprised if the mother is going to be responsible, even though if this story flipped on its head and the 2 men that were quote unquote pretending like they were married are no longer together, and one of them is sick, suing the mother for child support, I would not be surprised, especially in California.
Could you imagine being that guy?
I mean, really.
That guy that donated his seed to
Like,
to these
especially-
women, and then he's getting sued to pay child support. Like, oh man, that, like, the idea of reaping what you sow.
Really.
Is there a better
Yeah.
example?
Like, imagine though, like, especially if like you just like you're coming at it from just like as pure a motive as you can possibly, like, I'm gonna help people and this is gonna be great and this is the right thing to do. You know what I mean? Like, especially if you're coming at it, I guess, well, there's a certain amount of like naivety to how I presented that, but like we all know people that like you know, try to do the best that they can, you know, for the people around them, you know, like, you don't want to see bad things happen to those people, but at the same, you know, like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe it's my dark sense of humor where I'm just like,
Yeah. So wild. Well, let's go ahead and move on to our next story. A completely hard transition here because there's no good segue. But this is from the New York Post. Garth Brooks says he'll sell every brand of beer at his bar after Budlight Mulvaney fiasco. Garth Brooks won't be boycotting Bud Light. The 61-year-old famed country singer said he will offer the beleaguered Anheuser-Busch-owned brand at his new Nashville bar, despite the controversy over its marketing partnership with transgender social media influencer Dylan Mulvaney. I want it to be a place you feel safe in. I want it to be a place where you feel like there are manners and people like one another, he told the Billboard when asked about his new establishment. And yes, we're going to serve every brand of beer. We just are. Brooks added, it's not our decision to make. Our thing is this. If you are let into this house, love one another, he added. If you are an a-hole, there are plenty of other places on Lower Broadway. So I find this hilarious because, first of all, as someone who lives in Tennessee, I'll be sure to tell all my friends to not go to Garth Brooks's new honky tonk. And I'm going to make sure that instead they go to Redneck Riviera and support John Rich or someone to that effect if they're gonna go down to downtown Nashville, which already I don't necessarily recommend. But either way, I just find that hilarious because how absolutely oblivious can you be to understanding the base of the people that support you and that have completely fueled your $1 million career. I mean, it's obvious that conservatives are the individuals that listen to country the most. You know, whether you like country as a liberal or not, you cannot deny that the majority of individuals who are country music consumers are going to be conservative. And so I don't know if this is just Garth just genuinely not knowing anything about the situation and putting his foot in his mouth, or what the case may be. But I genuinely find this hilarious. And I don't know if we're going to see Garth apologize in the next few weeks or if he's going to double down like Bud Light. But either way, I am really interested to see what sales for his concerts start to do over the next 6-8 months.
Well,
but
probably not what you would hope, right? Or well, maybe not necessarily you per se. But one of the things somebody mentioned in the comments, because that's what popped into my head immediately after reading that is like the article headline is like he'll sell every brand of beer. I think the more accurate way to describe that is that he will offer every brand of beer, because especially right now with Bud Light, not a lot of people are going to be buying that. I don't think a lot of people, in my opinion, bought Bud Light on the best of times. Like, you may offer me Bud Light, I'm not going to buy it because I don't like drinking urine. Maybe it's me. Maybe I'm wrong on that one. Maybe I'm a bigot for not wanting to drink urine. But I listen, like, and then as far as like it being a welcoming establishment, like nobody wants to go to especially a bar, and I've been to a number of them and had to perform for hours on end music at them, many in that very city. You don't want to go to the ones where people don't look friendly. Like, I remember one time I walked into this bar and it was like, I definitely felt like I was about to like get in like a Roadhouse type of fight. And thankfully, as everybody who listens to the show knows, I learned everything I know about being a man from Roadhouse. So I was prepared for that. And I finally just like said, like, everybody was looking at me, and like, I don't think I, was dressed funny that day. I finally just said, calm down, everybody. I'm just here to have a beer. Like, you don't want to go to that type of establishment where that's the first thing you have to say before you even get up to the counter to order a drink. Right. So I can kind of see where he's coming from. Like, you want to have a nice, clean bar and a friendly establishment. And to your point, Connor, I don't think he knows what's going on. I think he might be vaguely aware of that. And it's mostly because, like, Garth Brooks, I don't know if you've like looked at him on social media or anything like that. I legitimately believe that he's been famous for so long that he does not know how to act like a human being. Like, I think he's in an elite category of like famous people where he just doesn't know. Like, so like, to your point, like, yeah, he does, but I don't think it's for any like malicious, like, I don't think he's trying to get any clout with anybody because he doesn't need it. Like, if he shows up in people's towns,
I disagree to a point, because specifically his comment about if you're going to be an a-hole. And I think,
but see, I don't think that was directed the way that you think it was. I mean,
maybe
like,
it's not, but either way, his misunderstanding of the Dylan Mulvaney situation. And in Garth, if for some reason you ever stumble upon our little podcast,
where are the bodies,
I'll just tell
Garth?
you.
Where are the bodies, Garth?
I will just tell you. The reason why people are upset is because Dylan Mulvaney not only is selling Bud Light, which used to also be sold to a very conservative audience, and his ideology is absolutely opposed to the conservative movement. Beyond just his ideology being opposed, Dylan Mulvaney has a very young demographic that listens to him and follows him on social media. So you have Dylan Mulvaney simultaneously selling beer to young individuals, mostly minors. I believe that someone has shown that his like bulk audience is around age 17. So he's marketing alcohol to underage consumers. And in addition to that, he is marketing transgenderism and that transgender queer ideology. And so this is not just a matter of Dylan Mulvaney is a gay man, in a commercial for adults. That would have its own issues. But
who's literally said he wants to be a child. He's literally dressed up as a child and said he wants to be a little girl.
Yes, he said little girl.
Really fast. Anyway,
absolutely. Yeah, no, he said that he wants to be a little girl, not a woman, a little girl. So you have a grown man wanting to be a little girl selling beer to teenagers. That's why the individuals are upset.
Yeah. And yeah, I don't know what Garth Brooks is thinking. I think people have to realize people come to establishments for a product. People come to listen to music for a product. Zach, when you perform, they want a product. They really, truly, at the end of the day, wouldn't care what your politics are, because that's the ideas that you espouse. If you play really good music and you perform, you give them a good show, there's a lot of things that people will completely ignore and overlook, lest you make a big deal out of it. See Michael Jackson for example, A. See Prince, for example, B. I mean, there's a lot of things that people just kind of ignored about Prince, ignored about Michael Jackson, because they thought that they were good artists, and they never really put their ideas and those problematic things about them on display up front. So I think what Garth Brooks should probably do is say, hey, you know what? We're opening up a bar here in Nashville. Come check it out. And if you have 2 or 3 bottles of Bud Light, then I probably wouldn't buy a lot of it if I was Garth, because from what I'm seeing, it is doing horrible. So even if you have some of it on, you don't have to even say anything. You got 4 bottles of it, and you're gonna still have 4 bottles next week. Just leave it alone. You don't have to make a big show out of it, because you're not going to sell it by being cantankerous and such like that, because people are not going to, they're going to come, as you said before, they're going to have a negative attitude about your establishment. That's going to drive down the morale of your bartenders, because they're not making gangs of money if people are doing this. And so all that stuff is going to tank, because you got a showboat and you got to flex about Bud Light when you could just say, you could just sell it. Nobody would even care. My Kroger, my grocery store still sells it.
Mhm.
They don't get out there and they're not chest beating about it. They're just offering a product. And if you want to buy it, it's there.
Exactly. That's why I liked, that's why in my mind, I was like, he may think he's, he might literally be that night that he thinks he's going to sell a few Bud Lights, but like, I would, if I were him, I would just say, we're going to offer. Yeah. That's to me the more,
Yeah,
I guess salesman-y. Yeah.
I completely agree. I just don't think he should have I don't think he should have mentioned it in the beginning. I completely agree with what you said. I think it, like you said, opening up a bar, come check it out, chilling like a villain, period.
That's what I think he was trying to say is what I'm getting at, though. I just don't think he did.
I disagree, because why even say the whole you're an a-hole if you don't, and we're going to love everyone
here. See, again, I don't think he's directing that.
Period, send. Everybody come check it out.
Yeah, I don't think that's what I'm saying is I don't think he's deliberately calling people, names by that. I just think he's just saying it was a tongue-in-cheek kind of thing, like, don't be a jerk if you're going to come hang out at my bar, right? So that includes the people, by the way, that are all about Bud Light and are defending Bud Light right now, right? Because there's some not nice people there that have had some very disparaging things to say. So I would say if he's going to be consistent, which again, he's not at this point a human being because he's been famous for so long that I'm telling you, watch his Twitter or his Instagram. It's horrifying. He's a goblin, but like he's been famous for so long that I don't think he understands. Like people are going to expect. I'm expecting that of him. Is okay. Like if you're gonna, if I'm not gonna buy Bud Light. Well, I mean, I was always a jerk about Bud Light prior to this happening. I was like, people are like, we're boycotting Bud Light. And I was like, good, it's gross. But I had no idea. But I probably know less than Garth Brooks about the Dylan Mulvaney thing. I just know it happened. So that's all I'm saying is I feel like this is one of those things where we might potentially be, Garth Brooks said something kind of nutty. And, I'm sure his bar will do fine. I'm sure somebody's going to buy Bud Light. I'm sure there's going to be all sorts of other disgusting light beers there that nobody should buy. It just, to me, this seems like one of those things that maybe we're just overreacting to a little bit.
See, and I disagree, because I think when he was asked about that, I think, what he should have done, honestly, been like, I don't know, man. I'm just opening a bar. I literally would have been like, there was this video I saw on TikTok of these two, like, guys who went to this award show a while back, and they wore dresses just to totally, like, be stupid.
The creators of South Park.
And they anytime they were asked, they just completely divulged the question. They completely ran around it. If I was Garth, are you going to serve Bud Light at your beer? Our bar opens, July 14th, 7, excited. Can't wait to see you guys there. But what about the Dylan Mulvaney? Man, bar opens on July 14th. I don't know what else to say.
But
I feel like he knows, because why else would you start making comments like you're an a-hole and everybody needs to love here if you're going to be here?
People were being jerks about the Bud Light thing. That's why. And he's probably, as nutty as he's been, as much as I have like berated him here the last few minutes, like he just wants to run a good, clean bar, at the end of the day. And I think that was just him, again, like I do agree with Connor and what's already been said by the three of you that like it's very clear that he doesn't know the ins and outs of the Bud Light controversy. He knows it's happened, and that was just kind of his tongue-in-cheek response to that, because like he is an entertainer. Like I could easily see myself making the same comment there, and like I might do what you were saying is like if I was asked about it, I might be like, hey, come see for yourself whether I've got Bud Light or not. Just because I also like poking people. I mean, I love poking people so much so that I might be like, yeah, we're going to serve Bud Light and we'll see what happens. Like, you don't have to drink it. There'll be other things offered,
Yeah.
Which is fine, which is fair.
That's what I'm saying is I'd rather him just say, we're going to offer. Like the smart thing to me would say, we're going to offer every brand of beer, not we're going to sell. Because first of all, no, you're not. Like anybody who's ever tried to sell anything in their life, especially if there's a variety of it, knows you're not going to sell one of everything or two of everything, So
to your point,
mathematically speaking, he's wrong.
To your point earlier, Zach, though, about you said that you don't think that this will actually make too much of a dent. I would have believed you at one time because I think that conservative individuals are terrible with boycotts. But I do think that this is a much different scenario. I think the reason why, first of all, Bud Light has tanked a lot because of this controversy. And a lot of why they did that is because their demographic is very conservative. And so when a majority of your demographic are more conservative, maybe freedom-minded individuals, and they make up a large portion of your buying demographic, a boycott of Bud Light, a focused boycott, is much more effective than just a general boycott that so many conservatives just talk about doing. Oh, you shouldn't have Disney, but everyone does. Or you shouldn't have Netflix, but everyone does. I don't, but I know that I am a rare find in that regard. But my point is, Target, on the other hand, I do not think has that same category where you could say that the majority of their consumers were all conservative-minded individuals. The majority of Target consumers, I don't have the demographics in front of me, but I'm sure it wouldn't be hard for me to guess that it's women. Yes.
it's soccer moms and kids in their,
and statistically women are not more conservative, but the Dylan Mulvaney thing, the Pride thing, it has upset enough people to where even Target is starting to hurt from it. So I am hoping that Garth does feel some heat from this, not because I wish ill on him, but because I hope that he understands what is at stake in this. And you might be right, Zach, giving him the benefit of the doubt that maybe he is just unaware of the controversy. But whether he's unaware of the controversy or not, this is such a high stakes situation that he needs to not be flippant about contributing to the conversation when it is such a heated controversy. Because I'm sure people in Des Moines, Iowa are probably not enjoying the pitch of, hey, if you're boycotting Bud Light because you don't want them pushing alcohol and transgenderism on your 17-year-old daughter, well, you're an a-hole.
Yeah.
I mean, am I wrong about that, Anastasia?
No, you're not wrong. Especially like what you guys were saying earlier, like how country artists are like mostly, for conservatives and people that usually like that music or that, like, not only are you attacking like one base that's going to be coming to your bar, you're also attacking your music base as well. So even if he's living on a different planet, his brain's kind of,
he's gonna get brought down to earth.
Yep. That's exactly what I was going to say.
Yeah. I mean, again, it's people, again, like Jason was talking about, people will overlook a lot for, a good artist at the end of the day. Like, the artists, I forget whose shocking behavior I have, well, I take that back. I live a pretty examined life. It does bother me from time to time. So maybe I'm not the best example, but, like he's right. People will overlook. Forget what I was trying to say there. He's right. Like people will overlook a lot. And in Garth Brooks, like, he sells out almost immediately. He's one of those artists, like, the minute you catch, even if you were like, let's say you're a Garth Brooks fan and like you catch wind that he might be in town, like, you better have got those tickets the minute that thought entered your head. Otherwise they're sold out. So unless a bunch of people are going to do like the stupid type of thing like they tried to do to the Beatles, where they bought Beatles records just to smash them, which doesn't make any sense because the Beatles still got your money. And so whatever you do with the vinyl is, it's up to you. So if people are just going to buy tickets to light them on fire, or like Kid Rock did, where he shot the Bud Light with a machine gun, I was like, why are you doing that, bud? Because you have to pay for the beer, Like,
yeah, in that kind of stunt,
like
though, he probably paid for a couple of cans of beer and probably lost them thousands in marketing.
Yeah. Well, I mean, nobody takes Kid Rock seriously, so I don't think that he's, what I mean? It's like, at the same reason I don't think a lot of people take Garth Brooks as seriously as, maybe like 15, 20 years ago, for sure. During our childhood, Connor, for sure. Like, if he tried doing something like this, you better believe people are not showing up to the concert at, the LA Forum the next day. But right now, it's like he's been famous for so long and nobody really cares. Like, I don't care about Garth Brooks, clearly, about Garth Brooks' opinion on things. So I don't know. I mean, for sure he's going to get some heat from. He's already getting heat from us, right? all four of us. So it's not that he's not getting taken to task, you know, and I'm sure everybody in the comments and who will watch this in the future, like have thoughts on Garth Brooks. So I just don't think it's going to be that severe.
There's definitely a gap between what artists believe and what their fan base believes, because honestly, a lot of country music stars are fairly left-leaning, and a lot of people don't know that or don't want to admit it. But that kind of brings us a little bit to our next story for the night. This is actually from timcast.com, and the writer is Hannah Claire Brimlow. Social conservatism reaches highest rate in decade. Greater social conservatism may be fostering an environment more favorable to passing conservative-leaning legislation, stated Gallup. The newly released Gallup survey also found that fewer people report taking liberal positions on social issues. The survey found 38% of Americans say they are conservative or very conservative on social issues, a 5% increase from 2022. So that's up just from this last year. The last time 38% of the population identified as conservative or very conservative was 2012. Since 2000, the greatest number of people who identified as conservative or very conservative, 42%, was in 2009. The number of Americans who reported being very liberal or very liberal on social issues increased during the last year, falling from 33% to 29%. Between 2000 and 2023, the percentage of Americans who identify as liberal or very liberal was at its highest in 2021 and 2022 at 34%. So this is obviously a trend that we are starting to see. I'm all washed up here, but it seems like I'm feeling this in general when I spend any time on social media, or even when I go out and about. And I live in a fairly conservative state, and I recognize that. But in general, it does seem that more and more individual people that we would call normies, they are more alert and aware of things like Budlight and Dylan Mulvaney, and just these I guess we'll call them culture war issues are really starting to bubble up to the point where we are seeing it just on the surface, just all throughout our culture. So I just thought that was interesting, but what are your guys' initial takes?
Yeah, that's something I've definitely noticed more as well. I mean, not necessarily just recently, but the last couple of years where like, and I think like it first manifested itself as like I was in a conversation with somebody who like definitely identified as liberal, but I was like, I don't think they're as liberal as like they think they are. Right. And then like I talked to another person, and I'm like, I don't think they're, you know, as liberal as they think they are. And then like somebody would, and then like something would throw me off the trail, right? Where somebody, I'm like, well, maybe they're not as conservative as they think they are. You know what I mean? But like that, it's, you know, I don't think in like matters of like principle, right? What it means to be a conservative has changed all that much. I think how it's presented has was kind of more, I spend the most time thinking about that. Right? Like I think a lot of people are freaked out by maybe not so much the Dylan Mulvaney thing, but things like, you know, well like you were outlining, Connor, like that was a great point about like him having a largely younger following, and like, okay, well, this is a beer commercial, and like adults who would be watching the beer commercial probably aren't going to know who this is, but their kids are. Mm-hmm. And it's like, okay, so you're not selling me beer right now. You're actually selling it. You know what I mean? Like you can see the dots connecting there. So it might not even be the trans thing. And then for some people, it might be, you know, that where they're like, you're asking my kid to learn about what in school, right? That was something I think I was mentioned in that article, right? I think a lot of people are starting to ask those questions, you know, or like kind of like I was talking about earlier, like, why can't we just like say pump the brakes and like, let's talk about this. I think that's where more people are at.
Well, and I think earlier we were talking a lot about like, Connor, you were talking about like comfort zones and all that kind of stuff. Like, I think as a society today, like we cannot be ignorant anymore. Like we all definitely took ignorance as a comfort and not having to pay attention and just focusing on other things and everything like that. But this is starting to seep into our homes and seep into things that we never thought it was going to seep into. Like my husband is from a really tiny town here in Iowa, You know what I'm saying? And there's kids from his old high school that are now in his siblings' high school, you know, being transgender or going to school as animals and stuff like that. You know what I'm saying? So it's like the people even in those kind of small towns who thought nothing's going to ever happen here. We're the nuclear family, you know, we've got that all covered and everything's great. I mean, like, evil and then the devil, he's coming for you, and it's time. And it's not masked anymore, and it's not just for us people who have to do our intricate research. He's coming for all of y'all. So it's one of those things where it's like seeping in, so we can't be ignorant anymore. And so I think one of the main things too is like you need to start deciding what side you're on. And I think that decision is starting to be presenting itself to a lot of people nowadays as well.
Yeah, I agree. The reality is it's really easy to want to retreat behind the walls and pretend that the orcs are not at the front gate, but the orcs are at the front gate. And the reality is, it is time to take up arms, honestly. And of course, I'm talking metaphorical. In case someone clips this,
you think I'm not going to clip this later, bro? Yeah.
Philosophically, metaphorically, spiritually, it is time for us to be engaged and be praying for individuals. Honestly, we need to be praying for our enemies. But the reality is there is an enemy, and he does roam around like a lion seeking someone to devour. And the reality is he is starting to see weakness in the herd, and he goes for the weakest ones first. And the reality is the reason why, to your point, Anastasia, your husband's small town is starting to see it. It's because, first of all, it's coming in through the children, which are the most vulnerable. You know, the predators always go for the most vulnerable. But beyond that, you know, it has seeped in from the areas where we expect it to happen, like LA and New York, and it's just permeating the entire culture. And that's why we need to realize, like I said in the thumbnail, there is no such thing as neutral spaces. We have to contend for the public square. And also, to Jason's point, not because it's our responsibility to make the world perfect, because we cannot do that, but it is our responsibility to make disciples, and it's our responsibility to do good works while we are occupying, you know, our home here on earth, because our real home is in heaven, but we are here on mission. The reality is we are, you know, you have to think about it from a standpoint of we are essentially warriors who are in enemy territory while we are here on this earth. And we need to get our marching orders each day from the Word of God, so that we are equipped to do good works. We need to put on the full armor of God and be ready to extinguish the fiery darts of the enemy.
Amen.
New ideas from big cities to country. Rural lags city, but ends up in the same place. That's from Lewis and Lucas podcast.
Yeah.
Yep. Exactly. It starts in the cities, but it always ends up coming to the country eventually. But Mikhail says, I disagree. The country can preserve gospel morality. I do think there's a point where being in, I don't know if you mean this as in the country as in America or the country as in the countryside, but I do think that there is a point either way to notice that being near nature and being surrounded by nature, it is so much easier to feel the presence of God. And I believe it was James Fenimore Cooper who wrote Last of the Mohicans and a couple other great books. And he wrote all about how it's easy to not feel the need for God when you are surrounded in a city and you have all of your needs being met by your fellow men. But go out into the ocean on a boat in a storm and you'll realize just how little you are and how present the God of the universe is and how little control you have. But
that's good.
Absolutely. Jason, any other thoughts on this rising trend of conservatism?
I think we need to be careful, because their conservatism doesn't mean that they're Christian.
Yeah.
Because they're conservative. So I think, and I think sadly, I think we just want people to be on our team. We don't want to be we don't want to be on the non-cool kids table. So we want, I want this particular person with a big name who professes to be conservative. Yeah. Let's bring him into our tent rather than trying to call to her. Because keep in mind, Candace Owens is a conservative. She's not a Christian though. A lot of her views, a lot of her ideologies are not Christian. So, okay, so you're letting in the wrong type of people. So I'm not saying that you can't agree with her politically, but let's just keep that in mind. Like her ideologies are extremely strange. So that being the case, you're going to end up putting yourself in a spot where you are siding with somebody who disagrees with you theologically just because they agree with you politically or socially. I'm not saying that we shouldn't look for that, but I think we might be inadvertently trying to do the same thing as we did before, which is trying to, make the world a better place, take over the world. Maybe we need to think about that before we get too excited about who is a conservative or who is not a conservative. Yeah. That'd be my pushback.
Absolutely. When you stop waving the pom-poms the moment that one individual says something slightly conservative, it's important to build a coalition, obviously, for political purposes. But yeah, I mean, like to use your example of Candace Owens, I think that Candace Owens calls herself a Christian. I believe that she probably has many Christian beliefs. I would just put her in the category of someone that probably has not thought too much about theology. If anything, it seems like she's on a path exploring it. Her husband is Catholic, and she did a whole big thing with Allie Beth Stuckey on Catholicism with her, Allie Beth, and her husband all discussing it. And she's obviously on a journey thinking about theology, but to me, it became apparent that she was just someone that did not think much about her theology prior to being challenged by her Catholic husband. And so, ultimately at the end of the day, we all need to think deeper about these things and know what we believe, like you said earlier, Anastasia.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Sierra Joel said, conservatives will take us down the road to hell too, just not as fast as leftist liberals. Jesus is the answer, not politics.
There we go.
Amen.
And yeah, I agree 100%. I will say this though. I do think it is a good thing to have open dialogue and discussion about politics and religious thought and such like that. More specifically, religious thought. Because I'm running into people who've not thought about their theology. They've never thought about what they actually believe about the threeness of God, or what they believe about baptism, what they believe about any of these other little small things. You mentioned earlier, Connor, we're not catechizing our children. What do I think about catechisms? What is a catechism? So there's a lot of people who haven't fleshed those things out. So then when they get challenged by somebody about it, they vacillate and capitulate. And next thing you know, they believe 9 different things. But when you put them all together, they're all conflicting. So to me, I think it's actually good. I tell people all the time, I think there's zero problem with having meaningful dialogue and discussion, even on social media. Maybe not Twitter, maybe not Reddit, but here in these YouTube suburbs, it's okay to have good conversation and flesh out things and talk them out and come to a place like, I understand it, because I was telling Connor before we came online, Zach, I am a former libertarian. And so I fully understand the libertarian idea, and I fully understand why I no longer subscribe to libertarianism. However, I think we would do well to encourage others to do the exact same thing. Like, get out there and explore. If you believe that Jesus Christ is Lord, I would suggest that you study, make sure you're ready, go pick a fight, and see what happens. So
and it's a process. I'm still in the process of kind of fleshing out all of my different theological stances, and catechism was a word that I just thought was only for Catholics when even just not too long ago. And you realize just the idea behind it is just having answers to questions of theology and faith. But either way, I completely agree. That's why Dear Woke Christian is one of many great channels that you can follow along to and get some theology under your belt. That being said, Jason, where can people follow you?
You can follow me on Dear Woke Christian, the podcast. We have Dear Woke Christian podcast, as well as Dear Woke Christian on YouTube. You can follow me. I will drop the link in the, you can follow me on my link in the bio link with all the different social medias. I'll put that on there in a second. But you can also follow me on dearwokechristian.com.
Perfect.
Well.
And you are on Rumble, and you need to grow that.
I'm sorry. I am on Rumble. Man, I can't wait for them to get a little bit bigger so that we don't have to skip that. But yes, that is I am on Rumble as well. Thank you for reminding me, friend.
Of course. Anastasia, where can people find you, keep up with you?
Primarily Twitter, so Anastasia_Hibbs, and then you can catch me on the Steve Day Show Tuesdays and Thursdays.
Awesome. Zach, where can people find you?
You can find me anywhere, everywhere, all at once. Apple, Spotify, all the places you listen to music. I can be found there. I'm also streaming every Tuesday. Funk Fuse, Blues, Psychedelia. Can you dig it? You bet your last money you can dig it. YouTube.com/my name. You can find me there. My new album is coming out here very shortly, so if you don't follow me on the social media, you should. Shame on you. I've got some new music coming out Friday, a tune called Beatnik Trousers. It's going to rock your socks off. It's going to scald your brain. Can you dig it?
Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for joining us. We have been Forge and Anvil. Jason's got to go sleep because he's in the Eastern time zone. And he's been yawning over here. But we appreciate everything that you guys contributed to the conversation. You especially, Jason, even though you're so tired. But thank you, everyone. Until next time, peace out.
Grace and peace, everyone.